The father reveals the bride's secret before the I do, and the millionaire exits through the side of the church. Frank Johnson felt his hands trembling as he watched his daughter Emily at the altar of St. Mary's Church in Denver. The French lace dress had cost more than he made in 2 years, but Michael Davis had insisted on paying for everything. Now, seconds before the most important moment of his daughter's life, Frank knew he had to speak. It was then that he rose from the first row, his shaky legs almost betraying him. Father Patrick stopped speaking mid-ceremony, and all 200 guests turned their eyes to the 58-year-old man sweating in his borrowed suit. "I need to say something," said Frank, his voice echoing through the silent church. Emily felt her heart race. At 26, she had built a new life with Michael, but she always knew this moment might come. Michael, 32, turned to look at his future father-in-law, not understanding what was happening. "My daughter..." Frank swallowed hard. "My daughter worked as a cleaner in Mr. Michael's company before you met socially." The silence that took over the church was deafening. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the tears burn. Michael remained still, processing the information. He had met Emily at a charity gala, where she had introduced herself as a business administration student. "She cleaned the offices of Davis Construction during the night," continued Frank, his voice breaking. "For 2 years while she was in college. She never told because she was afraid of losing you." Murmurs began among the guests. Mrs. Elizabeth, Michael's mother, brought her hand to her chest, outraged. The groom's businessman friends exchanged disapproving glances. Emily opened her eyes and saw the man she loved looking at her as if she were a stranger. "Why are you telling this now, Dad?" she whispered, tears flowing freely. Frank took a deep breath. His eyes discreetly searched for Robert Wilson at the back of the church. The old co-worker was there, as he had promised to be, with a cruel smile on his face. It was he who was forcing Frank to reveal the truth, threatening to tell about Emily's past in an even more humiliating way. Michael took 2 steps back, as if he had been punched. His mind raced. Emily had lied to him during 2 years of dating. Everything she had told him about her life was false. Anger and disappointment began to take hold of him. "You lied to me," he said, his voice low but audible throughout the church. "Michael, I can explain." Emily reached out her hand, but he moved away. 2 years, Emily. 2 years of lies. Without another word, Michael turned and walked quickly toward the side exit of the church. His firm steps echoed on the marble floor, and each sound was like a dagger in Emily's heart. She screamed his name, but he did not stop. The bride collapsed at the altar, her legs no longer able to support her. Jennifer, her only maid of honor and best friend since childhood, ran to support her. The guests began to stir, some standing up, others just whispering among themselves. "What have you done, Frank?" shouted Laura, Frank's wife and Emily's mother, rising furiously from the first row. "What have you done to our daughter?" Frank could not answer. His eyes were fixed on the figure of Robert Wilson, who was now discreetly heading toward the back exit. The blackmail had worked. Frank had been forced to destroy his own daughter's happiness to protect an even bigger secret, something not even Emily knew. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Father Patrick was trying to calm everyone down, but the chaos had already taken over. Mrs. Elizabeth, a 65-year-old woman always elegant and proud, was visibly upset. She had planned this wedding as a major social event, inviting all the elite of Denver. Now she felt humiliated. "I knew there was something strange about that girl," murmured Elizabeth to her sister Catherine. "Such a simple family, but she was always so polite, so perfect. Now I understand why." Michael arrived at the church parking lot with his heart pounding in his chest. His mind was at war. On one hand, he felt betrayed by the woman he loved. On the other, a small voice in his head asked why it mattered so much. Emily was the same person he had loved for the past 2 years. He got into his black Cadillac and sat there, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process everything. It was then that he saw through the window something that made him stop breathing. Inside the church, an elderly lady had fainted from all the commotion. It was Mrs. Margaret, 73 years old, who had been sitting in the last rows. Emily, even amid her own despair, had run to help her, kneeling on the marble floor without caring about her wedding dress. "Mrs. Margaret, are you all right?" asked Emily, holding the elderly woman's hand and gently stroking her face. The lady slowly opened her eyes and smiled when she saw Emily. "My dear, always so caring with me." Michael watched everything through the window, confused. How did Emily know Mrs. Margaret? He himself kept his distance from his own paternal grandmother, visiting her only occasionally at her simple home in the Aurora neighborhood. He felt ashamed of his family's humble origins, preferring that no one in his social circle knew that part of his life. But there was Emily, treating the elderly woman with a genuine tenderness he rarely showed. The two were talking softly, and Michael could see there was a real connection between them. "She didn't give up on me, not even today," said Mrs. Margaret, still weak. "Even with everything that happened, she came to help me." "You're special to me, Mrs. Margaret," replied Emily, helping her sit up better. "You were always so kind to me when I worked the night shift. You always left a warm little coffee and asked if I was okay." It was as if a lightning bolt struck Michael. Mrs. Margaret was the cleaning lady at the commercial building where his company was located. She had worked there for over 20 years, but he hardly paid any attention to her. Now he was discovering that Emily not only knew her, but had a caring relationship with the woman. "I always knew who she was," continued Emily, wiping tears from her own face. "I knew her from the photos in his office. I knew she was Michael's grandmother, but I never mentioned it because I realized he didn't like to talk about his family." Michael felt something break inside his chest. Emily had known who Mrs. Margaret was for 2 years and had never said anything. She had protected his secret, his foolish pride, while caring for the grandmother he himself neglected. Inside the church, Frank was being confronted by his wife, Laura. At 55, Laura had always been a strong woman who had practically raised Emily on her own, while Frank worked multiple jobs to support the family. "You're going to explain to me exactly what's happening here," said Laura, grabbing her husband's arm. "Why did you ruin our daughter's wedding?" Frank looked around, making sure Robert had already left. He sighed deeply before answering. "Laura, you don't understand the situation. I was forced to do this." "Forced by whom?" "Robert Wilson. He found out about Emily's past and was threatening to tell it in a much worse way. He said he would show up here in front of everyone and humiliate our daughter if I didn't speak first." Laura's eyes widened. Robert Wilson was an old co-worker of Frank's from the textile factory where they both worked for 15 years. He had always been a bitter and envious man, especially after Frank got a better job as a supervisor at a building materials store. "But why? What does he gain from this?" Frank lowered his head, ashamed. "He wants money, Laura. He said if Emily married a millionaire, we would be able to help him. When I said we couldn't do that, he threatened to destroy her reputation." Laura felt the anger boiling in her veins. For years she had been against Emily's relationship with Michael, not out of prejudice, but because she had feared exactly this. She knew the social differences could bring problems for her daughter, but there was something neither Frank nor Emily knew. Laura had her own reasons to fear that marriage, secrets from the past that she had kept for decades. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, Michael finally decided to go back to the church. Seeing Emily taking care of her grandmother had stirred something deep within him. He needed to better understand what was happening. As he entered through the side door, he heard raised voices coming from the garden in the back of the church. He recognized Frank's voice and discreetly moved closer. "You got what you wanted, Robert," Frank was saying. "You destroyed my daughter's wedding. Now leave me alone." "It's not quite that simple, Frank," replied a voice Michael didn't recognize. "The game is just beginning. You think I don't know other secrets your family has?" Michael hid behind a marble column, trying to make sense of the conversation. "What other secrets?" asked Frank, visibly frightened. Robert laughed scornfully. "You think I didn't find out about Laura, about the past she's been hiding from all of you?" Frank paled. "What are you talking about?" "Laura isn't who you think she is, Frank. She wasn't born poor like she led you to believe all these years." Michael felt his heart race. What kind of secrets were these people keeping? And who was this man who seemed to know Emily's entire family better than they knew themselves? Robert continued, enjoying the power he felt. Your wife was rich, Frank, very rich. She lost everything because of a family scandal and had to pretend to be someone else. That's why she didn't want Emily to marry Michael. She was afraid someone would discover the truth about her. Frank shook his head in disbelief. You're lying. Am I? Then ask her about the Anderson-Thompson family. Ask her what happened 30 years ago. Ask her why she changed her name. Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. Emily's family was full of secrets, and he was beginning to suspect that his own wasn't as clean as it seemed either. Robert moved closer to Frank, lowering his voice. Now you're going to give me what I want, or your daughter will find out things about her own mother that will destroy your family forever. What do you want? Asked Frank, defeated. Access to the Davis family. Now that the wedding is off, you're going to find a way to get me close to them. I need a job, an opportunity, and you're going to give it to me. Michael finally understood. That man wasn't just interested in destroying Emily. He wanted to use the whole situation to benefit himself, to get to the Davis family through blackmail and humiliation. But there was something Robert didn't know. Michael was there, hearing everything. Frank sighed, feeling the weight of all his wrong choices. I don't have any contact with them anymore, Robert. After what happened today, you'll figure it out, interrupted Robert. Or Laura will find out that I told everyone about her past. And Emily will know that her mother lied to her whole life, just like she lied to her fiancé. Michael felt a mix of anger and sadness. That family had fallen victim to a manipulator, and he had fallen into the trap. Emily hadn't lied out of malice, but out of fear, and now she was paying a high price for it. He went back inside the church, where he found Emily still taking care of Mrs. Margaret. The grandmother was already feeling better, sitting on one of the pews, but Emily remained by her side. Is my granddaughter okay? Asked Mrs. Margaret, holding Emily's hand. I'm not your granddaughter, Mrs. Margaret, replied Emily with a sad smile. To me you are, my dear. You show more affection for this tired old body than my own grandson. Michael felt the grandmother's words like a punch to the gut. It was true. He visited Mrs. Margaret only out of obligation, when he visited at all. Emily, even though she was a stranger who cleaned the building, had formed a genuine bond with the elderly woman. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mrs. Margaret, said Michael, approaching slowly. Emily looked up, surprised to see him there. She had thought he had left for good. Michael, exclaimed Mrs. Margaret, trying to stand up. My grandson, what happened? Why did you run off? Michael helped his grandmother sit back down, avoiding looking directly at Emily. Grandma, I was confused by some revelations. What revelations? About this wonderful girl here? Mrs. Margaret pointed to Emily. She is the most special person I have ever met. For 2 years, she took care of me better than any family. What do you mean, Grandma? When I felt sick during work, she would take me home. When I didn't have money for medicine, she bought it out of her own pocket. When I felt lonely, she would stay talking with me until sunrise. Emily lowered her head, embarrassed. She didn't want it to seem like she was trying to promote herself through Mrs. Margaret's words. And do you know what impressed me the most? The elderly woman continued. She always asked about you, always wanted to know if you were well, if you were happy. I would show her the photos you gave me, and she always said you seemed like a good person. Michael finally looked at Emily, whose eyes were filled with tears. Did you know she was my grandmother from the beginning? Emily nodded, unable to speak. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I realized you were ashamed of her, whispered Emily, and I didn't want you to know that I knew. I didn't want you to think I was trying to use that information in some way. Ashamed? Asked Mrs. Margaret, hurt. My grandson, are you ashamed of me? Michael felt the world collapse on his shoulders. How could he explain to his grandmother that he had spent years hiding the family's humble origins? How could he say he was ashamed of the woman who had raised his father when he was orphaned at 8 years old? Grandma, it's not that— Yes, it is, Michael, interrupted Emily, finding the courage to speak, and I always respected that. I never wanted you to feel uncomfortable. That's why I never mentioned that I knew her. Mrs. Margaret looked at the two young people and shook her head. You two are such fools. Love knows no social class, knows no money or status. You love each other. It's obvious to anyone who sees you together, and you're letting pride destroy it. But she lied to me, Grandma. And you? Didn't you lie about your family? Didn't you hide your origins? Didn't you pretend to be something you're not? Michael fell silent. His grandmother was right. He had built a persona of a successful businessman, hiding the fact that his family had started from nothing. His grandfather was a bricklayer. He had built the company's first building with his own hands. His father had inherited the business and expanded it, but the roots were humble. The difference, continued Mrs. Margaret, is that she lied out of love, so she wouldn't lose you. You lie out of pride, so you don't have to own up to who you really are. At that moment, Laura appeared looking for Emily. Seeing her daughter talking with Michael, she felt a mix of hope and worry. Emily, dear, I need to speak with you, said Laura, forcing a smile. Not now, Mom. I'm talking with Mrs. Margaret. It's urgent, insisted Laura, looking around nervously. Michael noticed the woman's anxiety and remembered the conversation he had overheard. Laura also kept secrets. Did something happen to Dad? Asked Emily, worried. No, I mean yes. It's complicated. I need to explain some things to you about our family. Emily sighed. She felt that this day was full of revelations, and she didn't know if she was ready for more secrets. You can speak right here, Mum. Mrs. Margaret is like family to me. Laura hesitated, looking at Michael and the elderly woman. It's not something that should be said in front of... In front of whom, Laura? Interrupted Mrs. Margaret firmly. A simple custodian? Someone who isn't educated enough to understand the problems of the rich? Laura blushed, realizing she had been prejudiced. That's not what I meant. Yes, it was, replied Mrs. Margaret. And you know something? I know more secrets of this town than you can imagine. I've worked for 40 years cleaning offices. I hear conversations, I see documents, I observe people. So perhaps you should be more careful with your words. Laura paled. There was something in the elderly woman's tone that frightened her. What do you mean by that? That I know who you are, Laura Anderson Thompson, or should I call you Laura Johnson? The silence that followed was tense. Emily looked confused from Michael's grandmother to her own mother. Mrs. Margaret, what are you talking about? Your mother isn't who she pretends to be, my dear. She was born rich, very rich. The Anderson Thompson family owned several companies in Denver 30 years ago. Laura sat down heavily on the church pew, as if her legs could no longer support her. How do you know this? Because I worked for your family, Laura. I was a maid in the Anderson Thompson mansion when you were Emily's age. I saw you grow up with all the luxuries money could buy. Emily was dumbfounded. Her mother had been rich. Why did you never tell me this, Mom? Laura began to cry, the tears of decades of lies finally welling up. Because we lost everything, Emily. Everything. It was a terrible scandal that destroyed our family forever. Michael remained silent, trying to process all the information. Emily's family was even more complicated than he had imagined. What kind of scandal? Asked Emily, holding her mother's hand. Laura took a deep breath before answering. My father, your grandfather, got involved in shady business. He embezzled money from investors, forged documents. When it all came to light, we lost the companies, the house, everything. He couldn't handle the pressure and took his own life. Mom, whispered Emily, hugging Laura. I had to change my name, Emily. I couldn't get a job. No one wanted to hire me. Anderson Thompson had become synonymous with dishonesty. That's when I met your father and started a new life as Laura Johnson. Mrs. Margaret nodded, confirming the story. I remember those days very well. Laura was 18 years old when it all happened. I saw a spoiled young woman turn into a strong woman overnight. That's why you didn't want me to marry Michael, said Emily, beginning to understand. You were afraid someone would find out. I was afraid you would go through what I went through, that they would discover our past and you would be publicly humiliated. Michael finally understood why Laura had always seemed uncomfortable with the relationship. It wasn't prejudice against him, but protection for her daughter. "But how did Robert Wilson find out about all this?" asked Michael. The three women looked at him, surprised. "You know Robert?" asked Laura. "I heard him talking to your husband in the garden. He's blackmailing you." Laura closed her eyes, desperate. "Robert worked at the same factory as Frank. He's always been a bitter man, especially after Frank got a better job. He must have investigated our family out of envy." "He wants Frank to help him get a job at my company," explained Michael. "He's using your secrets as leverage." Emily stood up, indignant. "He destroyed my marriage to get a job?" "The marriage isn't destroyed," said Mrs. Margaret firmly, "just shaken, and sometimes a shake is necessary for the foundations to become stronger." Michael looked at Emily, seeing her in a completely new way. She had lied, yes, but out of fear of losing him. She had taken care of his grandmother without expecting anything in return. She had protected his secrets, even when it hurt her. "Emily," he said, taking her hands, "I need to apologize to you." "Why?" "For reacting the way I did, for running off without giving you a chance to explain, for being ashamed of my own background and making you feel inferior because of yours. Michael, and most of all for not realizing that you are a much better person than I am. You took care of my grandmother, kept my secrets, loved me despite my flaws." Mrs. Margaret smiled, seeing her grandson finally mature before her eyes. "My grandson is learning that humility isn't a flaw, it's a virtue." But Laura was still worried. "What about Robert? He won't stop. Now that he knows everything, he'll keep blackmailing us." "Not if he's arrested first," said a voice behind them. Everyone turned and saw Frank approaching, accompanied by a man in uniform. "Daddy, what's going on?" "I called church security, honey. Robert Wilson was threatening our family. That's blackmail, and it has to be punished." The security guard nodded. "I've already called the police. Mr. Wilson is being detained outside." Emily hugged her father, finally understanding that he had been forced to reveal the secret. "Thank you for protecting me, Daddy. I should have been braver from the start. I should have stood up to Robert instead of letting him use our family." Michael approached Frank and extended his hand. "Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology." "Why, son?" "For not giving your daughter a chance to explain. For judging you without knowing the whole story." Frank shook Michael's hand, seeing sincerity in his eyes. "We all made mistakes today. The important thing is that there's still time to fix them." Mrs. Margaret clapped her hands, getting everyone's attention. "So, are we rescheduling this wedding or not?" Emily and Michael looked at each other. There was love there. That was undeniable. But there were also hurts that needed to be healed. "I think we need to talk more," said Emily. "We have a lot of things to work out." "I agree," replied Michael. "But I want you to know that I love you. In spite of everything, I love you." "I love you too," she whispered. Laura hugged her daughter, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "Now that everyone knows the truth about our past, I feel free for the first time in decades. Mom, it doesn't matter where we came from. It matters who we are today." "Wise words," said Mrs. Margaret. "And you know what? I think this family needs a grandmother. And I'm applying for the job." Everyone laughed for the first time on that tense day. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. While they were talking, Father Patrick approached the group. "Sorry to interrupt, but we still have a church full of guests waiting to find out what's going to happen." Emily looked around and realized there were indeed people waiting, unsure whether to leave or stay. "What do you think about going to talk to them?" suggested Michael. "Explain the situation and thank them for coming?" "I think that's a good idea," agreed Emily. Together, they walked to the altar. The guests watched them curiously, expecting some kind of explanation. Michael took the microphone from the priest and took a deep breath. "Friends, family, I apologize for today's confusion. We discovered our relationship was the victim of blackmail, and that caused misunderstandings between us." Low murmurs filled the church. "Emily and I love each other, but we recognize we have issues to work out. That's why we've decided to postpone the ceremony." Mrs. Elizabeth, Michael's mother, stood up indignantly. "You're going to cancel your wedding because of a cleaning lady." The silence that followed was awkward. Michael looked at his mother with a hardness she had never seen before. "Mother, that cleaning lady took better care of your mother-in-law than you ever did. That cleaning lady has more character in her little finger than many people here have in their whole bodies." "Michael!" exclaimed Elizabeth, scandalized. "And you know what, Mother? Our origins are humble too. Grandpa was a bricklayer. Dad started the company with his own hands. We only got to where we are because people like Emily built our foundation." Michael's words echoed through the church. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others seemed to admire his honesty. Emily took the microphone from his hands. "I did work as a cleaning lady, yes, and I'm not ashamed of it. I learned the value of honest work, of humility, of respect for people regardless of their social standing." She paused, looking directly at Elizabeth. "And if that makes me unfit for this family, then it's better that this wedding doesn't happen after all." Mrs. Margaret slowly rose from her seat and began to clap. The sound echoed through the silent church. Gradually, other guests began to applaud as well. Frank and Laura stood up, proud of their daughter. Then Father Patrick also applauded. Even some of Michael's business friends seemed impressed with Emily's dignity. But not everyone was applauding. Elizabeth remained seated, her face red with anger and humiliation. "This is absurd," she murmured to her sister. "My son is destroying our reputation because of a woman who has more class than you," interrupted Catherine, Elizabeth's sister. "From what I saw here today, she's exactly the kind of person Michael needs by his side." Elizabeth looked at her sister in disbelief. "Are you going crazy too?" "No, Elizabeth. I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years. We've become arrogant, prejudiced people. We've forgotten where we came from." Meanwhile, at the altar, Michael had taken back the microphone. "I ask for everyone's understanding. Emily and I will reschedule our ceremony when we're ready. This time it will be a celebration of truth, not appearances." He looked directly at his mother. "And it will be open to all the people who truly love us, regardless of their social class." The message was clear, and Elizabeth understood perfectly. She stood up abruptly and left the church, followed by a few like-minded friends. Mrs. Margaret approached the altar again. "May I say something?" Michael handed her the microphone. "My dears, I'm just a custodian. I've worked for 40 years cleaning offices, taking care of buildings. But in those 40 years, I've learned one very important thing." The church was in total silence. A person's character isn't measured by how much money they have, but by how they treat those with less money than them. And I can assure you all that this young lady here, she pointed to Emily, has the purest heart I've ever known. More applause echoed through the church. "And my grandson, despite all his flaws," she looked at Michael with affection, "is learning to be a better man by her side." Michael smiled at his grandmother, feeling proud of her for the first time in years. After the guests left the church, the family remained gathered in the front pews. Father Patrick approached them. "You know I've known you all for years, don't you?" he said, addressing mainly Michael. "Yes, Father. You've known my family since my father was young." "Exactly. And I can say your grandfather would be very proud of the man you've become today." "How so, Father?" "Your grandfather, William Davis, was a simple man, but wise. He always said that a family's greatest wealth isn't money, but the love and respect its members have for one another." Mrs. Margaret nodded, remembering her husband who passed away 10 years ago. "He always did say that." "And you know what else?" continued the priest. "He left a letter, asked me to deliver it on Michael's wedding day." Everyone looked surprised at the clergyman. "A letter?" Father Patrick left for a few minutes and returned with an envelope yellowed with time. "He wrote this 12 years ago when he found out he was sick. He said he knew that one day Michael would find true love, and that when that happened, he would know what to do." Michael took the letter with trembling hands. He opened it carefully and read aloud. "My dear grandson, if you're reading this letter, it means you've found someone special to marry. I hope she's a woman with a pure heart who loves you for the man you are, not for the money you have. If by chance you're hesitating because of her background, remember that I married your grandmother when she was a housekeeper. People said I was making a mistake. that our social difference would be a problem. But I can guarantee that the 50 years I spent by Margaret's side were the happiest of my life. She taught me that true love knows no social barriers. Don't repeat the mistakes I made at first. Don't hide your origins. Be proud of where you came from, because that's what made you the man you are today. And if the young woman you've chosen is the kind who cares for others, who has compassion for the less fortunate, then marry her immediately. That kind of woman is a rare treasure. With all my love and blessing, your grandfather William. The silence in the church was emotional. Michael had tears in his eyes, finally understanding his grandfather's words. "He always knew I would marry a housekeeper?" asked Mrs. Margaret, surprised. "Not only knew but approved," replied Michael, looking at Emily. "And he was right about you. You are a rare treasure." Emily approached him. "Michael, are you sure you want to marry me? Even knowing everything about my family, about my past? I'm sure I want to marry the woman who took care of my grandmother without expecting anything in return. The woman who worked overnight shifts to pay for college. The woman who loved me, even knowing all my flaws." He knelt right there in front of the altar, in front of the whole family. "Emily Johnson, will you marry me? For real this time. No lies, no secrets, no shame about our origins." Emily looked around. Her family was there supporting her. Mrs. Margaret smiled through tears. The priest waited hopefully. "Yes," she said, extending her hand to help him up. "I will marry you." They kissed right there, sealing a commitment that was now based on truth and genuine love. Frank approached Michael. "Son, you have my blessing. But promise me one thing." "Anything, Mr. Johnson. Promise you'll take good care of my daughter, that you'll never make her feel inferior because of her background." "I promise," replied Michael, shaking his father-in-law's hand. Laura hugged her future son-in-law. "Thank you for not giving up on her. Thank you for raising such a special daughter." Mrs. Margaret approached the group. "So when will the new wedding be?" Emily and Michael looked at each other. "How about 2 months from now?" suggested Emily. "Enough time to plan properly, without rushing." "Perfect," agreed Michael. "And this time we'll have a celebration that includes all the important people in our lives." "Including the company employees," added Emily. "Especially the company employees," corrected Michael. Father Patrick smiled. "It will be an honor to celebrate your union again. And this time, I'm sure it will be forever." As they left the church, Michael stopped at the door and looked back. "You know something? I think my grandfather planned all this." "How so?" asked Emily. "He must have known I needed to go through this experience to mature, to learn to value what truly matters." Mrs. Margaret laughed. "Your grandfather was always clever. Maybe he really orchestrated everything from up above." "Or maybe," said Emily, "true love always finds a way to overcome difficulties." They walked together toward the parking lot, now as a united family. The lies had been exposed, the secrets revealed, but love had prevailed. 2 months later, St. Mary's Church was once again decorated for a wedding, but this time the decorations were simpler, more welcoming. The flowers came from Mrs. Margaret's garden, and the arrangements had been made by Laura and some friends. Emily was in the church room adjusting her dress. She had chosen a simpler style, but no less elegant. Laura was by her side, helping with the veil. "You look beautiful, my daughter." "Thank you, Mom. And thank you for telling me the truth about our past. I feel more complete knowing our story. I should have told you sooner. I carried that burden for so long." "But now we're free of it," interrupted Emily. "And Michael is accepting me exactly as I am." Outside, Frank was talking with Michael, who was visibly nervous. "Everything all right, son?" "I'm anxious," admitted Michael. "I want everything to be perfect for her." "It already is perfect," said Frank. "What matters is the love you feel for each other." Mrs. Margaret approached the two, elegant in her navy blue dress. "My grandson, the time has come." Michael kissed his grandmother's forehead. "Thank you for everything, Grandma, for opening my eyes, for taking care of Emily when I didn't know how. Now it's your turn to take care of her, and I'm sure you'll do it very well." The ceremony began with the church full, but this time with a different audience. Besides family and close friends, all the employees of Davis Construction were present, along with Emily's college classmates, neighbors from the neighborhood where she grew up. Elizabeth, Michael's mother, was in the front row. It had taken her weeks to accept the situation, but she finally acknowledged that her attitude had been prejudiced. She wasn't completely comfortable yet, but she was trying to adapt. When Emily entered the church, walking beside her father, everyone stood up. Michael waited for her at the altar with tears in his eyes. This time there was no nervousness, only pure joy. Father Patrick smiled upon seeing them. "Dear brothers and sisters, we are gathered here to celebrate the love between Emily and Michael. A love that was tested, questioned, but proved to be true and lasting. During the ceremony they exchanged vows they had written themselves. Emily," said Michael, "I promise to love you not in spite of your background, but because of everything it taught you. I promise never to hide who I am again and to be proud of the extraordinary woman you are." "Michael," replied Emily, "I promise to keep being the woman you fell in love with, but without fear of showing my true self. I promise to support all your dreams, especially the dream of becoming a better person." When the priest asked if anyone had any objections to the marriage, Mrs. Margaret stood up. Everyone grew tense, fearing another drama. "I have an objection," she said with a firm voice. Emily and Michael looked at each other, worried. "My objection is that this ceremony should have happened a long time ago. These two were made for each other from the very first day they met." Laughter echoed through the church, easing the tension. "Now you may continue," said Mrs. Margaret, sitting down again. Finally, the moment for the "I do" arrived. "Emily Johnson, do you take Michael Davis to be your husband?" "I do." "Michael Davis, do you take Emily Johnson to be your wife?" "I do." "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The kiss was long, emotional, and applauded by the entire church. When they pulled apart, they were both crying with happiness. The reception was held in the church hall, decorated simply but with great care. The food was prepared by a catering service from the neighborhood where Emily grew up, and the music was provided by a family friend who had been playing at weddings for years. During the reception, many people approached the couple to congratulate them. Company employees shared stories about how Emily had helped them when she was a cleaner. College classmates spoke about her dedication to her studies. But the most emotional moment was when Elizabeth approached Emily. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Emily nodded, yes, following her mother-in-law to a more private corner. "I want to apologize," said Elizabeth with difficulty. "My behavior was unacceptable. I was wrong, and I admit it." "Mrs. Elizabeth, please let me finish. I watched you today, saw how you treat people, how people speak of you. I realized my son has found a special woman, and I almost ruined everything because of prejudice." Emily took her mother-in-law's hand. "What matters is that we are here now, together. Do you forgive me?" "Of course I do. We are family now." Elizabeth hugged her daughter-in-law, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Later, during the dances, Michael led Emily to the center of the hall. "Mrs. Davis," he said, smiling, "may I have this dance?" "With pleasure, Mr. Davis." As they danced, they whispered to each other. "Do you regret anything?" asked Emily. "Only that I took so long to propose, and I regret hiding my past for so long, but I understand why you did it, and in the end, everything worked out." "It did. And do you know why?" "Why?" "Because true love always finds a way." They kissed in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by family and friends who were celebrating not just a union, but a victory of love over prejudice. Mrs. Margaret watched everything from her table, next to Frank and Laura. "They are going to be very happy," she said. "I'm sure of it," agreed Frank. "My daughter found a man who truly loves her." "And my grandson found a woman who made him a better person," added Mrs. Margaret. Laura smiled, watching her daughter dance. "You know something? I think all this trouble was necessary. If it hadn't happened, they might have gotten married while hiding who they really were." "That's true," agreed Frank. Sometimes we need to go through hardships to appreciate what we have. The reception continued late into the night. When it was finally time for the newlyweds to leave for their honeymoon, everyone gathered to say goodbye. "Where are you going?" asked Laura. "To a special place," replied Emily mysteriously. "We're going to the town where my grandfather was born," explained Michael. "I want to know my roots, our real history. And then," added Emily, "we'll come back and start a new project at the company." "What project?" asked Frank, curious. "A scholarship program for employees' children," replied Michael. "We want to give others the opportunities we had." Mrs. Margaret applauded. "Your grandfather would be proud." "We hope so," said Emily. "And we hope to honor his memory with our actions." The goodbyes were emotional. Hugs, tears of happiness, promises of frequent visits. When they finally got in the car and drove away from the church, Emily and Michael were holding hands. "Do you believe we made it?" she asked. "Made what?" "Turned the worst experience of our lives into the best thing that ever happened to us." Michael smiled, kissing his wife's hand. "We made it because we faced everything together, and that's how it will be from now on." They drove in silence for a few minutes, soaking in the happiness of the moment. "Michael?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For coming back. For giving me a second chance. For learning to love me exactly as I am. Thank you for teaching me what true love is. For taking care of my family better than I did. For making me a better man." They kissed at the red light, sealing not just a marriage, but a complete transformation of their lives. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this love story that overcame all social barriers. Do you believe Emily and Michael made the right decision by reconciling? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. We would love to know your thoughts on this journey of discovery and forgiveness. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.